My niece said out loud, "We don't invite him. He's embarrassing," while unwrapping a gift I had mailed. So I called the venue I paid for, reserved the date in my name, and had the security team escort half the table out when the booking conflict became public. I, 42M, never thought family gatherings would become the backdrop for my personal humiliation, but here we were. The incident that shattered everything happened on a Tuesday afternoon when I was scrolling through social media during my lunch break. My younger sister had posted a video of my niece's engagement party, an event I knew nothing about, and there, clear as day, was the moment that would change everything. The video showed my niece unwrapping gifts in front of a small crowd of relatives. When she got to mine, a vintage pearl bracelet that had belonged to our grandmother, something I'd mailed directly to her apartment, her face twisted into something between disgust and amusement. She held it up, and even through the phone screen, I could see her mockery. Then she said it, loud enough for everyone to hear and for the phone to pick up clearly. "We don't invite him because he's embarrassing." The room erupted in laughter. My sister, my brother, their spouses, cousins I'd grown up with, all of them laughing. My mother was there too, and while she didn't laugh, she didn't defend me either. She just looked away, which somehow felt worse. I sat in my car in the parking lot, watching that 30-second clip over and over. The bracelet I'd spent 3 months tracking down through estate sales. The card I'd written by hand, congratulating her on finding love. All of it reduced to a punchline. The embarrassing part? They weren't entirely wrong. I'd built a successful career in tech, made more money than anyone else in the family, but I'd done it by being awkward, intense, and obsessive about my work. I didn't drink at parties. I didn't tell jokes. I preferred talking about encryption protocols over sports. At family events, I was the one in the corner, checking my phone, leaving early. Over the years, the invitations had become fewer, and I'd convinced myself I didn't care. But this was calculated cruelty. I went home that evening and started digging. My niece had gotten engaged 4 months ago, and the wedding was scheduled for 8 months from now. I pulled up every social media post, every comment, every tagged photo. The venue was the Hartley Estate, a historic mansion turned event space about 40 minutes outside the city. It was expensive, the kind of place that required booking a year in advance and a substantial deposit. That's when something clicked in my memory. 3 years ago, my sister had asked to borrow money. Her husband had lost his job, and they were struggling with their mortgage. She'd come to me, tearful and desperate, asking for $30,000. I'd given it to her, no questions asked, no repayment plan demanded. She'd promised to pay me back when things got better, but we'd never discussed it again. Then, 2 years ago, they'd asked again, this time for the down payment on a new car. Another $15,000. 6 months after that, it was credit card debt. $22,000. Each time, I transferred the money within days. I had more than enough, and they were family. I pulled up my banking records and did the math. Over 3 years, I'd given my sister and her husband $67,000. None of it repaid. None of it even acknowledged anymore. The next morning, I called the Hartley Estate. I explained that I was interested in booking their venue for a corporate event. The woman on the phone was professional and friendly. She asked for my preferred date, and I gave her the exact date of my niece's wedding. There was a pause. She apologized and explained that the date was already reserved under another name. I asked if she could tell me more about the reservation, and after some back and forth, she revealed what I'd suspected. The booking was under my sister's name, but the deposit had been paid from an account I recognized, the joint account my sister shared with her husband. I took a breath and asked a different question. Who actually owned the venue? She seemed confused by the question, but eventually transferred me to the events manager. After explaining that I had some concerns about a potential booking conflict, I was transferred again, this time to the owner. The owner was a businessman in his 60s who'd bought the property 5 years ago. We talked for 20 minutes, and I learned something interesting. The Hartley Estate had a policy where bookings could be challenged if someone could prove they had a prior financial interest in the date. It was an obscure clause, something about preventing double booking disputes during their transition period when they'd bought the property from the previous owners. I asked him hypothetically, what if someone could prove they'd financially contributed to a booking under someone else's name? Would that constitute a prior interest? He was quiet for a moment, then said it would depend on the documentation and the circumstances, but theoretically, yes. I thanked him and hung up. Over the next 2 weeks, I built my case. I gathered every bank statement, every transfer record, every text message where my sister had asked for money. I found the messages where she'd promised to pay me back, where she'd called me her hero, where she'd said she couldn't do it without me. I documented every dollar. Then I drafted a formal letter. In it, I outlined the financial assistance I'd provided, $67,000 over 3 years. I noted that none of it had been repaid despite promises to do so. I explained that I had reason to believe a substantial portion of this money had been used to fund a wedding booking at the Hartley estate, and that as the actual financier of said booking, I was claiming priority interest in the date. I sent the letter to the venue's owner via certified mail, along with copies of all my documentation. Then I waited. 4 days later, I received a call. The owner had reviewed my materials and wanted to meet in person. We met at a coffee shop halfway between the city and the estate. He brought his lawyer. They'd done their homework. They'd contacted my sister, who'd initially denied receiving any money from me. When they showed her the bank records, she'd changed her story and claimed it was all gifts, not loans. But the text messages were damning. Her own words talking about paying me back, about borrowing, about being in my debt. The owner's lawyer explained the situation. Legally, it was murky. My sister had made the booking and paid the deposit. But I could prove I'd provided the funds that made that deposit possible. If I wanted to push it, I could potentially force a cancellation or, at minimum, create enough legal uncertainty that the venue would want to avoid the liability. The owner cut to the chase. He didn't want a legal battle. He had a reputation to maintain. He proposed a solution. I could book the date under my own name for a corporate event. My sister's booking would be canceled due to the conflict, with the deposit refunded minus a cancellation fee. If she wanted to rebook for a different date, she'd have to start from scratch. I asked him how much it would cost me. He named a figure, $25,000 for the full venue, catering, and event coordination. I could do whatever I wanted with it. Host an actual event, leave it empty, rent it out to someone else. I transferred the money that afternoon. The venue sent my sister a formal notice the next day. Her booking was being canceled due to a priority conflict with a prior reservation. The letter was corporate and cold, explaining that someone else had claimed the date with documented financial priority. Her deposit would be refunded, minus 20% for administrative fees. My phone exploded within hours. My sister called 17 times. My brother called. My mother called. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I sent a single group text to my immediate family with a link to the video of my niece mocking me, followed by, "Since I'm too embarrassing to invite, I figured you wouldn't mind if I used the venue I paid for myself. Enjoy finding a new location." Then I muted the conversation. The next few days were chaos. My sister tried to rebook the Hartley estate for any available date, but everything within 6 months was booked solid. She started calling other venues, but with the wedding just 8 months away, most places were already reserved. The few that had openings were either terrible or outrageously expensive. My mother showed up at my apartment on a Saturday morning. I almost didn't let her in, but she looked exhausted, and despite everything, she was still my mother. She stood in my living room and asked me what I was doing. She said my sister was devastated, my niece was crying every day, and the whole family was in an uproar. I told her to watch the video. I pulled it up on my laptop and made her watch it 3 times. I asked her if she heard what my niece said, if she saw everyone laughing. I asked her if she'd said anything to defend me, her own son. She looked at the floor and admitted she should have spoken up. But she said this, canceling the wedding venue, was too far. I was destroying my niece's special day over a stupid comment. I showed her my bank records then. Every transfer, every request for money, every promise to pay me back. I watched her face change as she realized how much I'd given them, how much they'd taken while simultaneously treating me like a joke. She tried to argue that it was different, that family helps family, that I had the money to spare. I told her she was right. Family should help family. But family also shouldn't humiliate family on social media. Family shouldn't take tens of thousands of dollars and then laugh when that same person tries to give a meaningful gift. She left without saying goodbye. Update 1. The wedding was in 3 weeks, and my sister still didn't have a venue. I knew this because my cousin, one of the few family members still speaking to me, had called to tell me how bad things had gotten. They'd found a community center that could accommodate the guest list, but it was depressing compared to the Hartley estate. The photographer had to be rebooked. The catering company had to be changed. Everything was falling apart. My cousin asked if I was satisfied. She didn't ask with judgment, just genuine curiosity. She said the family was split. Some people thought I was justified. Others thought I was a monster. She wanted to know what I was planning to do with the venue. I told her the truth. I hadn't decided. Part of me wanted to just leave it empty, a monument to their cruelty. Another part wanted to host something meaningful, maybe a charity event, just to prove I could use the money they'd taken for something good. She suggested something else. She said I should go to the wedding, wherever it ended up being, and make my presence known. Prove I wasn't embarrassing, prove I was better than they thought. I thanked her for the suggestion, but told her I had a different idea. 2 weeks before the wedding, I received a call from my niece. It was the first time she'd contacted me directly since the video. Her voice was small and strained as she asked if we could talk. I agreed to meet her at a neutral location, a park near my apartment. She showed up looking miserable. The confident, mocking young woman from the video was gone, replaced by someone who looked genuinely broken. She apologized immediately, explaining that she'd been showing off for her friends, trying to be funny, and she didn't realize the video would spread. She said she never meant to hurt me. I asked her if she'd meant what she said, if she really thought I was embarrassing. She hesitated, then admitted that she'd always found me difficult to connect with. She said I was distant at family events, always seemed annoyed to be there, and she'd grown up hearing jokes about weird uncle from her parents. She'd internalized it without questioning it. I asked if she knew how much money I'd given her parents. She didn't. I told her the exact amount, and her face went pale. She had no idea. She'd known they'd borrowed money once or twice, but not the full extent. Definitely not that the wedding deposit had come from money I'd provided. She started crying, saying she didn't know what to say, that she understood why I was angry, but her whole wedding was ruined, and she didn't know how to fix it. I made a decision then. I told her I'd give her the venue back on 3 conditions. First, she had to publicly apologize on the same social media platform where she'd mocked me. Not a vague sorry if anyone was offended post, but a real apology acknowledging what she'd said and why it was wrong. Second, her parents had to sign a formal repayment agreement for the money they'd borrowed. I didn't care if it took them 20 years, but there would be a contract with a payment plan. Third, and this was non-negotiable, I wanted a private conversation with my sister and her husband where they explained, in detail, why they thought it was acceptable to take my money while allowing their family to mock me. She agreed to everything immediately. Update 2. The apology video went up 3 days later. My niece sat in front of the camera, no makeup, eyes red, and explained exactly what she'd said, why it was cruel, and how she'd been wrong. She talked about the money I'd given her family, how I'd helped them when no one else could, and how she'd repaid that kindness with public humiliation. She didn't make excuses. It was raw and genuine, and within hours, the comments section was flooded with support for me and disappointment in her. The video got more views than the original. Several family members who'd laughed in the first video commented apologizing. Some tried to claim they hadn't known the full story. Others admitted they'd been swept up in the moment. Either way, the narrative had shifted. The contract was harder. My sister and her husband came to my apartment, and it was the most uncomfortable 2 hours of my life. Her husband tried to argue at first, saying I was holding the wedding hostage, that this was extortion. I reminded him that I'd never asked for the money back until they'd made it clear I wasn't welcome in their lives. I told him he could sign the contract or find his own venue, but I was done being the family ATM with no respect in return. My sister broke down halfway through. She admitted they'd been taking advantage of me. She said they'd convinced themselves I didn't care about the money because I never brought it up, because I seemed so detached from the family anyway. She said they'd started resenting me for having so much when they were struggling, and that resentment had turned into casual mockery. It was the first honest conversation we'd had in years. They signed the contract. $500 a month for the next 12 years, with interest. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the principle. The venue was transferred back to my niece's name a week before the wedding. I paid the rebooking fee myself and arranged for all the original vendors to be restored. Everything went back to how it was supposed to be. I didn't attend the wedding. I told my niece I appreciated her apology, but I needed space from the family for a while. She understood. She sent me a handwritten thank you card after the event, along with a photo of her wearing the pearl bracelet I'd given her. She said it was the most meaningful gift she'd received. My mother called after the wedding and asked if we could have dinner. We met at a quiet restaurant, and she apologized for not defending me, for enabling my sister's behavior, for letting me become the family punchline. She said she'd always assumed I didn't care because I seemed so self-sufficient, but she realized she'd been using my independence as an excuse to ignore how I was being treated. I accepted her apology, but I told her things couldn't go back to how they were. I needed boundaries. I needed respect. And if the family couldn't provide that, I'd build my life elsewhere. She said she understood and that she'd work on it. The monthly payments started coming in on schedule. My sister sends a brief message with each transfer, nothing flowery, just an acknowledgement. We don't talk beyond that, and I'm okay with it. I've been going to therapy to work through the years of feeling like an outsider in my own family. My therapist says I have a tendency to use money as a substitute for connection, and she's probably right. But she also says what I did wasn't about revenge, it was about demanding to be seen. And for the first time in my life, I was. If you'd like to see more stories like this, a gentle tap on the subscribe button would mean the world to us.